Hey guys, tonight we drift into ancient Egypt, somewhere between warm desert dusk and the cool hush of the Nile. You're stepping barefoot onto sand that still holds the sun's heat. And fair warning, if you were actually here in real life, chances are you wouldn't survive past tomorrow. Not because of any pyramid curse or mummy nonsense, but more likely because the bread is suspicious, the water is a gamble, and sunscreen hasn't been invented yet. But, lucky for you, this is a story. So the worst that can happen is that you get a little bit of sand in your imaginary sandals. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, leave me a comment telling me where you're listening from, and what time it is there, because somewhere out there, someone is listening at sunrise, and someone else is falling asleep after midnight snacks. And both are equally valid bedtime choices. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sand crunches softly under your feet as you step forward. The day is fading, and the sky stretches wide in soft bands of gold and violet. The desert seems to sigh with relief as the sun sinks. A breeze rises from the Nile, carrying the faint sweetness of lotus blossoms and a soundscape of distant frogs, as if the whole land is unrolling a lullaby on your behalf. You take another step and notice your toes sink just slightly into the warm grains. Oddly enough, sand in Egypt is not all smooth, golden stretches. Sometimes it's gritty, mixed with shards of dark rock, or scattered with gleaming bits of quartz. In fact, some ancient Egyptians believed that the desert itself was a place of challenge and mystery. And here you are, crossing it with nothing but curiosity as your guide. A shape rises in the distance, silhouetted against the fading light. No, it's not a pyramid yet. We're saving that for later. Instead, it's a modest stone gateway, its lintel etched with hieroglyphs that glimmer faintly as the last sunlight hits them. You lean in close, trying to puzzle them out. The translation, however, is disappointingly ordinary. Something about land boundaries, irrigation channels, the kind of legal notice that basically says, no trespassing. Even in an age of radiant gods and painted tombs, paperwork was king. The desert coolness deepens. Overhead, a single bright star makes its appearance, most likely Sirius, known to the ancient Egyptians as Sa. It wasn't just a twinkle in the sky, it was their calendar alarm clock. When Sapdet rose, just before dawn, it meant the Nile would soon flood, a blessing that meant new crops, new life, and a slightly higher chance that bakers wouldn't run out of your favorite barley bread. Imagine relying on a tiny star, not an app notification, to remind you when your whole civilization's lifeline is about to refill. You keep walking, and the long silence of evening lets your mind drift. Think about it. Ancient Egypt is so associated in modern minds with grand tombs, pyramids, and painted sarcophagi, that we often forget that most Egyptians lived relatively ordinary lives. They worked, they chatted, they fussed about chores, and critically for us tonight, they went to bed. In fact, historians have found traces of everyday objects, like low headrests carved from wood or stone, meant to keep the head steady and lifted during sleep. Comfortable? Maybe not. Almost certainly. But for them, proper positioning was tied to not just personal rest but also cosmic balance. As your imaginary feet wander into softer sand near the riverbank, reeds tickle your calves, and you catch the faint squeak of a hippo far off in the water. Historians still wonder if hippos were charming bedtime soundtrack material or just noisy, uninvited neighbors. The truth is probably both. This land was not quiet in the way we think of quiet night. Instead, evenings here were full of buzzing, croaking, rustling life. A patchwork choir that sang humans toward their rest. Your eyelids can almost feel the heaviness of this night settling. Imagine lying on a woven mat spread on the cool ground, the stars scattered across the ink blue sky above. Someone next to you blows out a flame from an oil lamp, sending a curl of scented smoke spiraling upward. You breathe it in. It's faintly sharp, maybe frankincense, maybe myrrh. The air in Egypt seems designed to linger with memory. Even passing scents feel like they belong to eternity. Asterisk, as you stretch, you think about how oddly fragile sleep must have felt to them. No locks on doors the way we know them, just thin walls of mud brick, an open world beyond. And yet, there seems to have been a kind of collective trust in the rhythm of night. Farmers folded away their tools, traders put down their ledgers. Even scribes retired from their endless copying sessions, all under the unspoken promise that life resumes after dreams. Asterisk. Some Egyptologists argue that sleep itself was considered a rehearsal for death, a nightly mini-passage into another world. Were the Egyptians comforted by that thought, or secretly unnerved? We may never know fully. You lie down in the hum under a blanket of stars, and let the question trail off like a half-whispered lullaby. What did the ancients dream about? And did they ever wake up laughing at them? The same way we sometimes do after a bizarre 3 a.m. dream about flying bread loaves, or running late for a chariot race. Asterisk. The coolness deepens, and hereby the first edge of night, with sand against your back and the wide arch of eternity above. You feel the land itself nudge you closer to calmness. Everything around you seems designed for slowness. Rustling reeds, drifting smoke, gentle ripples of the Nile. Sleep isn't an intrusion here. It's woven into the very pulse of the evening. Asterisk. Little by little, dusk leans into night, carrying you deeper toward the next part of this journey. The stars seem to thicken as you walk further. Velvet pools overhead stitched with tiny, unreachable fires. The desert night is not a curtain that falls all at once, but more like a dimmer switch that someone keeps turning. Very, very slowly. The warmth of the day slides off your skin, replaced by a cooler hush that feels like the world exhaling. And in this soft darkness, you arrive at the threshold of something unusual, a royal idea that's equal parts bizarre and oddly cozy. You've come to meet a pharaoh who insists that bedtime advice belongs on stone. Not papyrus scrolls, not oral tradition around the fire, but walls, immovable, monumental walls. Imagine walking into your bedroom and finding "remember to wash your feet before bed" carved permanently onto your wallpaper. That's the sort of decorative flair being pioneered here. The palace exterior glistens in the moonlight, its mud brick walls plastered and painted with colors that once shouted far more vividly than the sun-baked hues you see now. You tread carefully over smooth stone tiles, and there it is, a new commission from the Pharaoh hieroglyphs, arranged in neat, solemn bands. Except this inscription doesn't warn against curses, or record some triumphant smiting of foreign enemies. It's bedtime instructions. Gentle reminders to get proper rest, to breathe slowly, to trust in dreams. A royal PSA, delivered in stone. One might chuckle at the thought, but this was serious business to the Egyptians. In their worldview, the line between the living and the divine softened at night. Dreams were considered nightly postcards from the gods, and the state of your sleep could be a matter of cosmic alignment. Why wouldn't a ruler want his people to have orderly slumbers? A well-rested kingdom is, after all, less likely to miscount grain supplies or mix up offerings intended for the temple of Horus versus the temple of Sobek. Your guide me, still hovering cheerfully and with minimal judgment, points out a quirky detail. These nighttime edicts weren't meant for everyone. While ordinary farmers just flopped onto reed mats after a day of labor, the pharaoh's inscriptions adorned spaces where priests, scribes, or visiting nobles might pass. It's kind of like putting relaxation tips only in the VIP lounge. Ordinary folks could nap however they liked. The chosen few got stone-curated instructions. What exactly did these bedtime texts say? That's the delightful mystery. Today, Fragments discovered in ruins suggest phrases we can only half interpret. Things like lie still so the breath flows easily, or the dream, if remembered, is truth. Historians still squint over the grammar though. Did these lines mean do this every day, or on rare sacred nights only? The stone isn't inclined to clarify. Still, as you stand in the glow of torchlight, you can picture artisans hunched at the wall, while the pharaoh hovered behind them, probably saying things like, "Make the hieroglyph for fluff pillow bigger, please." Of course, the Egyptians didn't quite fluff pillows the way we do. Their version was that stiff, crescent-shaped headrest, carved from wood, ivory, or even stone, if you were fancy. Yes, it's about as comfortable as it sounds, resting your skull on what looks like a mini soap dish. Historians think they believed it helped preserve elaborate hairstyles, or allowed air to flow around the head. But still, neck support, not great. And here's where you have to laugh quietly to yourself. Imagine an ancient artisan chiseling a command to sleep peacefully into limestone while his spine cracked from long hours hunched over and his head remained pillowless. Maybe irony is timeless. You step back to take in the whole scene. Torches flicker in metal braziers, throwing light across carved walls already old enough to have seen generations slumbering beneath them. The crackle of fire mixes with the muffled scuffing of guards' sandals. In the stillness, you can almost eavesdrop on the pharaoh's thoughts. What's the motivation here? A true mission for public wellness. A ruler's eccentric hobby. Or maybe, just maybe, an ego so large it stretched into the nighttime routines of his subjects. Historians still debate which pharaoh might have conceived such things. Some suggest a lesser-known ruler, hungry for an unusual legacy. Others point toward administrative kings who loved order in every corner of life, including the bedchamber. But truth lingers out of reach, much like a dream that slips away the moment you wake. You brush the wall with your fingers, don't worry. You're invisible here. No ancient guard is rushing to arrest you and trace the grooves of symbols shaped like owls, reeds, and reclining figures. You can almost feel the intent behind them. Gentle, calming, even humorous at times. Imagine a royal decree that simply says, "Do not let your neighbor's donkey keep you awake." Pragmatic, soothing, and entirely possible. All around, the palace murmurs with a nighttime rhythm. Wooden doors creak softly. Servants extinguish lamps, careful not to drip wax. Out in the courtyards, statues cast enormous shadows that look like they're tiptoeing across the flagstones while you watch. And you are in the audience of a peculiar project. A ruler's attempt to manage sleep through permanence. As if the world could be told, rest well, and Egypt stays strong. Would it have worked? Can rest be commanded? Even now, the question settles into your mind with a kind of cozy absurdity. Perhaps not, but perhaps in laying down the words, even if on cold, unyielding stone, the pharaoh was trying to make rest sacred, valuable, something greater than the passing act of closing one's eyes. Perhaps he was whispering across time that sleep itself deserved honor. Under the cool dark, the Nile sighing nearby, you take this thought with you, like a seed gently pressed into your palm. Knowing the journey stretches further, the desert is waiting, the palace is breathing, and your night in ancient Egypt has only just begun. The palace breathes with a hush as you step deeper inside. Your sandals echoing faintly on polished limestone, as if the walls themselves are politely listening to your every move. The transition from desert night to royal twilight feels like slipping beneath a soft blanket. The world outside may be wide and restless, but here within these walls, light bends low and shadows learn to whisper. Asterisk, through an arched doorway you wander, moving into corridors decorated with painted reliefs of lotus flowers and zigzag waves that seem to shimmer and sway in the unsteady glow of oil lamps. The air is thick with a sweet, slightly bitter scent, the burn of dried resin in clay bowls, meant to keep away insects, which, you discover, are an eternal enemy of a good night's sleep. Mosquitoes have always been ambitious, and ancient Egypt was no exception to their relentless nighttime buzzing. Imagine trying to drift off while being harassed by what essentially amounts to the world's smallest trumpeter, practicing a solo directly in your ear canal. Asterisk, the walls ahead are a tapestry of color, though softened now by centuries. At the time you've entered the moment of your lingering, dreamlike visit, they gleam still. Deep blues, earthy reds, golden strokes that catch the flicker of lamps. Lotuses bloom endlessly. Ducks waddle across painted marshes, and there, between the flowers, a curious depiction of a person reclining on what looks suspiciously like a couch. Is it an early diagram for bedtime posture, or simply an invitation to admire the king's leisure skills? Historians still puzzle, arguing over whether these images are hints of domestic comfort or just symbolic repetition. Asterisk here, you pause to breathe. The air hums with the ambient chorus of palace life winding down, a servant adjusting curtains of woven reed, a distant splash of water as someone rinses bowls, a guard coughing softly in the courtyard. The palace, though grand, is not immune to the most ordinary of night sounds. And there, in the corridor, you enjoy an illusion that time itself has slowed paintings. Sounds, scents, all arranged into a gentle score, nudging you toward calm. Asterisk at your side, the painted gods watch. Hathor smiles faintly from the wall, a goddess of love and joy, often called upon to bring peace and music to homes. Next to her, the dwarf-like god Base, who specialized in household protection, seems almost to wink at you. His tongue juts out in a strange grimace, his posture more squat than upright. He is both comic and fierce, designed to frighten away any unwanted shadows skulking into one's room. The ancients placed carvings or amulets of him especially in bedchambers and eternal nightlight guardian, doing his work without complaint. Asterisk, you imagine being an ancient noble guided through this corridor for the first time. The Pharaoh leans toward you, perhaps chuckling softly, saying, "Yes, we take bedtime very seriously here. Please note the suggestion on proper reclining angles." The guides would nod sagely, while in their minds perhaps wondering whether this was visionary genius or just another eccentric. Royal quirk on par with commissioning golden slippers no one could wear comfortably. Asterisk A. Funny thought arises, even thousands of years ago, people probably had mixed reactions to wellness advice. Some took it seriously, adjusting themselves dramatically. Others yawned and said, "Hey, I sleep fine on rush mats. Thanks." Perhaps you'd be in the second category, rebelliously sprawled sideways on your mat, while a wall command solemnly advises you to lie straight, like the Nile. Asterisk further into the corridor, your eyes are drawn upward to a painted ceiling dotted with stars, each one delicately brushed in gleaming patterns meant to echo the heavens. Lying beneath such a ceiling, you would fall asleep with the cosmos above you, both outside and inside, reflected back in art. It wasn't only decoration, it was an attempt to fold the infinite into the everyday, so that rest became a ritual watched over by eternity itself. This was no plain plaster ceiling that may have developed suspicious cracks. This was architecture designed to tuck you gently under the Milky Way. Asterisk, so you walk slowly along, each step cushioned by woven mats beneath your feet. Somewhere far off, a harp player plucks a final refrain, the notes bending in languid arcs, meant not to stir the heart, but to soothe it. Music, after all, was not always about celebration or triumph. It was about rocking you into rhythm with the universe. And this palace, in its moonlit quiet, feels more like a lullaby than a fortress. Asterisk, a corridor opens onto a chamber washed in pale orange lamplight. Thick columns stand like silent sentinels, their capitals shaped like lily buds. Between them lies a space meant purely for transition, the soft hallway before the softest room. You linger here, hearing footsteps fade away, feeling the atmosphere change. The air seems denser, warmer, as though even the architecture understands the shift from business of day to mysteries of night. Asterisk. And so you keep walking, absorbed in the subtle play of walls, shadows, lamps, carvings. You brush your hand across painted lotus stems trailing endlessly along the panel and think, there was comfort here. An attempt to tame the wildness of evening. After all, the desert outside was vast, unpredictable, alive with unseen clattering. But in this palace corridor, order is etched into every detail. Asterisk. One irony remains. Though, the more rules you write about sleeping, the harder it can sometimes be to actually relax into it. Could the very act of carving bedtime tips onto walls pressure someone into lying awake, worried whether they're doing it correctly? You imagine a priest, squirming uncomfortably. Am I aligned with cosmic breath? Or is this more of an average mortal nap? Perhaps insomnia is not as modern as we think. Asterisk. Yet here, under golden lamps, with the hush of twilight around you, all the questions dissolve gradually into softness. The Pharaoh's palace may be eccentric, but it is also strangely tender in its devotion to rest. The paintings, the incense, the quiet corridors, they are all aligning you not toward grand pyramids or battle scenes, but toward something simpler, the universal, timeless act of surrendering to sleep. The corridor narrows, and as you pad farther in, the gentle scrape-tap of chisels greets your ears. Stone carvers are still at work, long after the sun has bid the world good night. The rhythm of their tools is almost hypnotic, a kind of accidental percussion orchestra. Scrape, pause, tap, scrape. It's not loud, not jarring, but steady. Like someone stubbornly insisting they can both create history and doze off at the same time. Asterisk. You lean closer, observing the artisans by torchlight. Sweat glimmers on their brows even though the air has cooled. Their hands, calloused and strong, move with such careful precision as if they're not just cutting letters into stone, but coaxing them out, persuading the rock to reveal instructions it has been holding since time began. Yet their faces betray a more human truth. They are tired. In fact, one of them yawns mid-stroke, nearly misaligning a hieroglyph meant to represent a dignified reclining figure. The irony is delicious. You're engraving advice about rest while desperately needing a nap yourself. Asterisk. The carvers chatter quietly together as they work. You catch fragments of their conversation, complaints about aching backs, musings on whether the gods really care if people recline left or right before dreaming, the eternal debate over whether the reed mats in the north of the Nile Delta are more comfortable than those in the south. Their camaraderie is soft, tinged with that combination of grumbling and laughter that only emerges in the last hours of a long shift, when fatigue becomes its own kind of humor. Asterisk. It strikes you how skilled they must be. These artisans trained for years, taught not only how to depict gods and kings in all their sculpted glory, but also how to chisel delicate, flowing text across hard surfaces. Their whole livelihood was to preserve ideas as though eternity itself were a canvas. But tonight, those ideas amount to bed directives. Inhale deeply before sleep. Close the eyes as one closes the petals of the lotus. One worker even chuckles at the absurdity of carving phrases that essentially say, "Don't forget to relax." Asterisk. And yet, you have to admire the sincerity behind the project. In the ancient Egyptian worldview, words weren't just practical notations, they were powerful forces. Spoken language could call forth blessings or curses. Written inscriptions could charge an object with energy. Carving bedtime tips, silly though it sounds to us, may have been seen as an act of making rest itself sacred, blessed, woven into the continuity of cosmic order. If so, these sweaty, yawning carvers were essentially priests of relaxation, though probably underpaid priests at that. Asterisk. Near the corner, you notice a lesser-known quirk. One artisan has doodled a miniature sketch in the margin of his work. A tiny bird, awkwardly drawn, appears to be reclining on what looks like a stone pillow. Was it a joke? A practice sketch? or simply a bored craftsman injecting humor into permanence. Historians still argue over whether such margin doodles were tolerated artistry or dangerous You can almost hear the scholar debates echoing. It's satire. It's a secondary symbol. No, it's just the ancient world equivalent of doodling during a staff meeting. Asterisk as the tapping continues. Your eyelids feel heavy from the steady rhythm. The whole space seems to breathe in sync. The flames flicker, the chisels scrape, the walls hum with half-born words. You lean casually against a column, amused at the sheer domesticity that hides under the surface of supposed grandeur. Pharaohs may project colossal authority, but their monuments are made one sleepy stroke at a time, by tired workers muttering about sore wrists and squinting at details in poor light. Asterisk, you catch another moment of levity. One worker insists that the hieroglyph for dream should be taller than the one for snore. Another counters, saying snores are louder, thus deserving prominence. A supervisor sighs. You stretch your own neck sympathetically. Even listening to them feels like joining a midnight club of overtired creators. Asterisk, the truth is, history is often softened by these human details. What looks massive from a distance, a civilization, a dynasty, an empire up close, is really just people at work, some grand and proud, some weary and yawning, all of them stitching together fragments of daily life into something that, for reasons they might never fully grasp, will outlast them by millennia. Here it's sleep advice on stone walls. Somewhere else, it was pottery painted or reeds woven. Tonight, the chisels whisper. All of it mattered. Asterisk, you drift around the chamber one last time, brushing your fingers lightly along grooves that still wait to be smoothed. The artisans yawn again, put down tools, stretch their shoulders, and decide enough is enough for now. Even stone carving eventually loses to the promise of sleep, and as they step away, rubbing dust from their hands, you hear the faintest sigh of relief ripple from the walls themselves, as if even the hieroglyphs know when it's time to rest. You wander onward, guided by torchlight that pools across the polished limestone floor, until a doorway opens into a chamber that feels entirely different, quieter, softer, almost padded by its own silence. Here, the pharaoh's obsession with rest is expressed not in walls of carved reminders, but in objects meant to cradle, or at least attempt to cradle, the weary body. Asterisk before you is an odd but mesmerizing collection of what passed 4 beds. These are not the spring mattresses or fluffy duvets of your modern imagination. Instead, you see frames of carved wood, their surfaces woven with leather thongs or intricately bound reeds. Above them, sometimes balanced precariously, are pillows of the strangest design, rigid, crescent-shaped headrests that look like someone mistook a staircase railing for a good idea. They're polished smooth, often from ivory or stone, and decorated with tiny images of protective gods. You lower your head experimentally into one, only to realize it's like trying to nap on half a melon rind. Asterisk, and yet, for all the strangeness, there was logic here. Ancient Egyptians believed keeping the head lifted ensured better breathing, cooler air circulation, and maybe even spiritual attentiveness during the voyage of sleep. The head, after all, was the seat of dreams, the receiver of nighttime messages from divine realms. To rest it on a simple bundle of straw would be unthinkable when so much was at stake. Never mind your poor neck muscles. Asterisk nearby, other ceremonial beds stand proudly, more elaborate than practical crafted, with animal legs sculpted into lion paws, or curved frames that rise like miniature thrones. Some are plated with gold leaf, gleaming under lamplight, as though they're too confident to ever be covered by humble linen. You get the sense no one actually rolled around on these. They were more visual sermons than furniture. Yet still they spoke. Sleep is not simply rest. It is an act of dignity, a rehearsal for both death and resurrection. Lie down properly, and you honor the cycle of creation itself. Asterisk still. You chuckle quietly, Because what these objects radiate in grandeur, they lack in comfort. Imagine a pharaoh, draped majestically in his linen, climbing atop such a stiff contraption and whispering to himself, "Ah yes, another night of spiritual enlightenment," and mild cricks in the shoulder. There's a shared humanity here with every person who's ever tossed, turned, and thought, "I've made a terrible choice in pillows." Asterisk running your fingers along the wood. You can feel faint carved ridges, tiny protective spells cut into the frame. They might say something as simple as, "Guard the sleeper," or "Let no harm draw close." In truth, these were as much incantations against nightmares as they were against thieves. A world that never locked entirely at night needed charms as companions. Imagine each creak in the dark soothed, not by telling yourself it's just the wind, but by believing that literal, divine guardians crouched invisibly at the legs of your bed, comforting in its way. Asterisk, it's a bit like how we cling to plush toys, lucky socks, or bedtime playlists. Ancient Egyptians had god figures carved into furniture instead. Same sentiment, different packaging. Asterisk, historians have even found folding beds crafted for travel, where important figures would lug their sleep setups on campaigns or pilgrimages to temples. Picture the royal equivalent of camping equipment, lugging a collapsible wooden frame around the desert, trying to look dignified as servants assembled your portable sleeping throne under the open stars. The thought almost makes royalty feel approachable. They, too, lugged awkward bedtime baggage. Asterisk, an amusing side note, historians like to mention. Some ceremonial beds found in tombs suggest they were never truly slept on. They were props, stage pieces for eternity. Who needs comfort in forever? Instead, the symbolism mattered more than the nap. Eternal rest didn't care about stiff ivory headrests digging into your neck. Mortality, however, very much did. Asterisk, you stand in the room a while, absorbing the absurdity and reverence all at once. The chamber smells faintly of cedar wood, used to strengthen and scent furniture frames. Outside, the faint lapping of Nile breezes drifts in, and the whole chamber feels like a catalog of experimentations in sleep comfort. Some wise, some questionable, none particularly familiar. Asterisk, and here, you realize something soft and universal. Every society, regardless of time, obsesses in its own way about how people should go to bed. Our world today sells memory foam and lavender sprays. There's carved lions onto bed legs and lifted heads with ivory crescents. The impulse is the same. Make sleep seem safe, noble, and maybe just a little fancier than it needs to be. Asterisk, so you step away from the beds, leaving the stiff headrests gleaming, the lion-legged frames waiting eternally for dreamers. You let yourself imagine lying across one, despite the awkwardness, trying to appear as serene as the pharaoh might, though deep down secretly wondering if you'll wake up with the most ancient of neck cramps. Comfort or no, the night moves gently forward, pulling you with it as you leave the ceremonial designs behind. The air shifts as you wander into a smaller chamber, where the atmosphere is thicker, richer, and warmer. Here you are no longer surrounded by carvings or furniture, but by fragrance itself. The room is heavy with the bittersweet perfume of oils, incense, and herbs. If the earlier palace corridors spoke of architecture and order, this space whispers of softness, intimacy, and the gentle nudging of the senses toward rest. Asterisk, clay jars line the shelves, broad and squat, sealed with beeswax and marked with symbols you can't quite decipher. Servants stoop low, ladling drops of dark oil into tiny cups. In the lamplight, the liquids shimmered deep amber, hypnotic blues when shadows catch them oddly, faint opal glints as though a rainbow had folded itself into a jar. You lean closer and breathe, and the mix washes over you. Frankincense, smoky and cool, myrrh sharp and resinous, lotus oil whispering with sweetness. If rest had a personality, this might be what it smelled like. Asterisk, you dab at a jar, cupping your hand to your nose. The scent clings to your skin like invisible silk. Beside you, a servant in linen grinds herbs with a stone pestle, fennel, mint, chamomile's ancestor plants. These were added to drinks, poultices, even woven into garlands for temples. The Egyptians were devoted to their herbal pharmacopoeia, and they knew many blends that soothed the mind. Tonight, they are preparing them for bedtime, layering aromas so that your nose, whether or not you want it, would be led gently toward closing your eyes. Asterisk, it's oddly reassuring to realize that thousands of years ago, people were already searching for their equivalent of lavender spray and melatonin tea. There is a certain comfort in acknowledging all of humanity has wrestled with sleep, almost as if rest has to be tricked into visiting us. Some recipes made sense: lotus oil, calming and fragrant. Others were more ambitious. Historians whisper of potions rich with opium extracts, honey, and unidentified plants. Effective, perhaps safe. Less certain. You imagine the test subject waking in the morning both drowsy and surprised. Their hair was dyed green as a side effect. Asterisk. Still, you respect their effort. Everything here is purposeful. Oils rubbed on the skin not only softened it against desert dryness, but were believed to keep divine spirits attentive, close enough to watch over the sleeper. Smoke curling up from burning incense wasn't just for scent. It was a symbolic offering, a message meant for gods wafting upward alongside your steady breathing. Asterisk, and the luxury of it all. Imagine closing your day not with a quick face wash and brushing of teeth, but with attendants rubbing scented oil on your temples, braiding herbs into your pillow mat, and fanning smoke lazily across the room. You could almost forgive the stone headrests if you had this much indulgence leading you into slumber. Asterisk. In the far corner of the chamber, a small bronze censer releases a steady curl of smoke. You stare at its hypnotic spiral and think of one peculiar historical tidbit. Some Egyptians believed smoke itself could carry away bad dreams before they even arrived, almost like an early form of dream-filtering Wi-Fi. The incense was considered a network, catching troubling visions and scrambling them before they entered your head. Historians still wonder whether this was understood as superstition, science, or simply metaphor, but the thought lingers intriguingly. Asterisk, the room is alive with tiny sensory details. The soft grinding of herbs, the faint splash of liquid poured into a shallow dish. Whispers of attendants reminding one another not to overheat the oil lamps. There is no rush here. Evening has settled deep and broad, and the chamber hums with one theme: prepare, gently, for surrender to sleep. Asterisk, and while scents dominate, touch plays its own role. You let your hand brush across a woven linen cloth, freshly soaked in scented oil. It's cool, smooth against your skin, carrying with it not only fragrance, but also memory. These textures, these rituals, this was how the Egyptians wrapped their senses in a cocoon. This was how they said, your body is safe, your spirit is held. Asterisk, for fun, picture someone allergic, sneezing in the midst of such solemn preparations, desperately waving away the incense, while the attendants whisper in panic, "What will the gods think?" It's a reminder that, for all the grandeur, these moments were still pressed through ordinary, fallible, human life. Someone probably did sneeze spectacularly into the censer, and the smoke wobbled. And now, millennia later, you chuckle at the thought. Asterisk, yet standing in this chamber, inhaling that blend of sweet and sharp, calming and heavy, you can't help but surrender a little yourself. The scents seem designed to drag you into drowsy surrender whether you approve or not. The oils shimmer in the lamplight, the incense curls slowly upward, and something unseen tugs at you. The ancient, tender reminder that sleep deserves beauty, that sleep deserves ritual. The chamber of scents dissolves behind you, and now you step out again, into the open air. At first, you think you've wandered into silence, but the world corrects you quickly. The royal gardens stir with life, a low chorus of rustling reeds, trickling water, and the secret conversations of frogs who've been practicing their nighttime symphonies for millennia. The air feels moist, cooler than inside the palace, wrapping you in a balm as soft as woven linen. Asterisk here, under the sway of moonlight, the royal gardens are transformed into something like a lullaby written in green. Pools gleam under stone walkways, lined with papyrus plants, whose slender stalks bow ever so slightly, as if weary from the day. Lotus flowers float on dark water like pale lanterns, their petals faintly closed, as if even flowers are following the Pharaoh's bedtime commandments. Somewhere overhead, a palm frond creaks lazily in the breeze, like the world's oldest rocking chair. Asterisk, you stroll along the path, sandals striking against smooth, cool tiles that lead you deeper into this nocturnal world. Servants are gone, no chatter now, no footsteps. Just you, the water, the chorus of insects. Even cicadas buzz, but here, in the humid hush, their song feels less like an alarm clock and more like the percussion in a drowsy orchestra. Asterisk, in the moonlight, statues watch silently from the shadow stone lions resting in pairs near the ponds. Not so much threatening as contemplative, their expressions softened by the dim glow. Beside them, carved ducks float eternally, frozen tribute to the real ones flapping around the garden earlier. Fountains spit lazy arcs of water, droplets splashing into pools where golden fish shift beneath the surface, flickering like mobile stars beneath the moon. Asterisk, and there, yes, frogs, entire choirs of them. Historians like to remind us frogs were more than mere pests to Egyptians. They symbolized fertility and renewal, their seasonal songs tied to the flooding of the Nile. But for you, this moment is simpler. Frogs croak and chuckle like old friends reenacting bedtime stories for anyone who lingers long enough to listen. Yes, they are oddly loud. Yes, one in particular seems determined to sing too close to your path. Still, taken together, their calls form layers of lullabies older than any written music. Asterisk, the royal gardens often served as more than decoration. Some functioned as sacred landscapes, recreations of the marshes and fields that, in Egyptian mythology, predated all creation. Pools symbolized the primeval waters, and the lotus floating on their surfaces was the original flower from which the sun god rose. To lounge here at night wasn't just relaxation, it was practically reenacting the dawn of the cosmos, on a smaller, gardener-approved scale. Imagine telling your friends, "Yes, I slept by the pond last night. No big deal. Just communed with the origins of the universe." Asterisk, the smell of flowers drifts toward you in bursts. Heavy night-blooming jasmine twining along brick walls. Lily bouquets placed earlier by servants, now leaning languidly as petals curl shut. The perfumes mix with the faint wet earth scent from the pools. You breathe slowly, settling into the layered calm. Asterisk, a fact that tickles you. Some Egyptian rulers allegedly kept exotic plants or animals, hieroglyph trees imported from faraway lands, even monkeys or herons. You pause to imagine one very sleep-resistant monkey shrieking into the early hours while a pharaoh mutters about enforcement of his sacred bedtime laws. Perhaps not every bedtime garden was tranquil, but tonight, at least in your journey, the monkeys are silent, and only the hum of crickets keeps you company. Asterisk. Historians still debate how publicly accessible royal gardens might have been. Were they sacred zones for priests alone, or strolling grounds for favored guests? Did ordinary palace servants ever sneak in here after hours just to nap near the cooling water, ignoring any warnings carved into stone? Tradition rarely tells us, but the question lingers in the fragrant night air like an unanswered note. Asterisk, you pause by a papyrus thicket, leaning down to dip your fingers into the water. It's startlingly cool, as if the Nile itself sent a secret tendril under the garden gates. The ripples sing outward across the pool, disturbing the reflection of stars, until they seem to stretch into ribbons of silver. Watching that slow-motion shiver of the sky on water feels enough to lull anyone toward heavy eyes. Asterisk, there's a softness here, one that transcends time. Sculpted lions, croaking frogs, swaying reeds, they are all playing their parts in a theater devoted entirely to the night. Even you, walking with sand still clinging to your toes, are an audience member invited into the performance. And though you laugh a little at the thought, yes, frogs have been opening night headliners for several thousand years, the entire garden seems intent on keeping you. Asterisk. You close your eyes briefly, standing against a column near the pond. A light wind bends the papyrus so it brushes your hand, and the sound of the fountain is a steady hush, like an eternal mother shushing her children to bed, because that's what the garden is, a great cosmic cradle, humming for you, cradling you softly, even as moonlight spills its silver balm across sleeping flowers. You leave the gardens reluctantly, carrying with you the frog's lullaby and the cool damp air of papyrus ponds. The palace corridors narrow again, and you are guided softly toward a quieter chamber, a place guarded not by lions or blossoms, but by silence thick as velvet. The scent of ink clings here, the faint tank of soot mixed with gum, and a new sound fills the space, the soft scratch of a reed pen dragging across papyrus. Asterisk. At a low table, a scribe lifts his head. His lamp burns low, smoke trailing lazily to the ceiling. His eyes squint, either from fatigue or years of staring at tiny hieroglyphs under poor light. When he notices you, yes, somehow he notices. Despite your ghostly invisibility, he leans in with a conspiratorial smile. His voice is a dry whisper, almost swallowed by the rustle of papyrus. Do you wish to hear the secrets of night? Asterisk. Your answer doesn't matter. He's already unrolling a scroll in front of you. Layers of reed fibers glued, hammered, polished, inscribed. Words swim across the sheet in neat rows. Accounts not of harvests, not of taxes, not of wars, but of rituals for sleep. Advice written by priests and healers, philosophies from dream interpreters. Small comments about the proper time to extinguish lamps, as if the business of bedtime deserved as much paperwork as ruling an empire. Asterisk. The scribe speaks slowly, his tone part pride and part amusement. Too many think the sun is everything, he murmurs, but the sun has successors in the night. We write them down so they are not forgotten. He points to a passage you cannot quite translate. Perhaps it says, "Close your eyes when the stars first rise." Or maybe it is less poetic, something about shutting the windows before beetles crawl in. Truth can be both divine asterisk and asterisk, practical asterisk. It's then you learn a fun fact, whispered as though it were scandal. Scribes sometimes slipped personal notes between their lines. In one fragment from the ruins, scholars found an extra phrase tucked in among the rest, a comment, translating roughly to, asterisk, "And may the gods grant me fewer work hours." Asterisk. A bedtime protest, still legible centuries later. You chuckle at the thought of an ancient employee complaining in writing where only eternity could read it. Apparently, workplace humor has always been carved deeply into the human condition. Asterisk. His reed pen scratches again. He draws a small glyph, meaning dream. It looks almost like a man reclining on his side, poised just between awareness and drifting. He explains in hushed affection that writing had power beyond comprehension. To write the dream was to trap it, he says, and to trap it was to understand it. His fingertip grazes the dried ink, as though reassuring the word itself. Asterisk. This idea, words that harness sleep's universal here. Imagine your restless night scribbles on a sticky note being treated as cosmic artifacts by future civilizations. Highly significant, the archaeologists would say, while solemnly reading your half-legible note. Asterisk must buy milk. Asterisk. Asterisk. Still, you have to admire him. The scribe is thin, wiry, with a posture that suggests decades of leaning over scrolls, and yet his face softens while he works, as though writing these nighttime notes is every bit as worshipful as copying prayers or histories. He seems devoted, but also a little weary. His whisper cracks once when he admits, I sometimes fall asleep at my desk. Who among us hasn't? You picture him waking with ink smeared across his cheek, only to declare it an omen in the morning. Asterisk. Historians still puzzle over the extent to which scribes served as keepers of ritual, alongside their bureaucratic duties. Was this man a humble clerk, or a night sage with command over dreams? The debate continues through centuries, with no final verdict, and you rather like the uncertainty, because it means he is free to remain both. Asterisk. You notice how quiet the air is in this chamber. Outside, frogs are still calling. Beyond the walls, workers may be stacking jars or tending to lamps, but here, nestled among scrolls, the only sound is scratching reed pen and a faint hum in the scribe's throat as he works. Perhaps he hums because words themselves are incantations, or perhaps he hums to stay awake. Which explanation is true? History, predictably, doesn't bother to confirm. Asterisk. The scroll lies completed in front of you. Lines, neat and sure. Instructions for sleep. Warnings against ignoring your dreams. A small sketch of the god base tucked in the margin to scare away anything unfriendly. All of it, in the end, is just one long whisper through time. Sleep matters. Dreams matter, and perhaps most of all, you matter as the one who dares embark into the night. Asterisk. The scribe stretches, yawns loudly a proper, jaw-cracking yawn rolls up his scroll. His head droops for a moment, just long enough for you to realize even the author of Insomnia Cures succumbs to fatigue. Gently, he rests his forehead against a stack of papyrus, breathing steady. You watch the lamp flame sputter, as if to tire itself, wavering toward a small curl of smoke. Every detail insists. It is time for rest, in every language. You tiptoe away from the slumbering scribe, leaving him to his papyrus pillow and half-burned lamp. The palace corridor opens into another low chamber, this one buzzing softly with voices that seem to hang in the air, like incense smoke waiting for your curiosity. A circle of figures lounges cross-legged in the glow of lamps, and you quickly realize you've arrived at the company of dream guides, those who specialize in fishing meaning from the clouds of sleep. Asterisk. They notice you not with alarm, but with that serene, half-dreaming awareness of people who've been awake too long at night. One beckons you closer, as if to say, asterisk, sit, traveler. Dreams are for sharing, not hiding. Asterisk. You settle down on a woven mat that smells faintly of reeds and a touch of sesame oil. Above you, the roof is painted with stars, like you are already asleep inside your own skull. Asterisk. The dream guides whisper of their trade. To them, dreams are not random oddities, but letters from the divine realm, folded and delivered nightly by friendly and sometimes mischievous gods. One elder chuckles as he describes someone once dreaming of a chicken walking backward, which was interpreted as, "You will pay your debts late." Another adds that if you dream of fish, especially many fish, swimming together, it presages abundance. You think quietly to yourself, it also presages waking up craving seafood stew. Asterisk. They show you a papyrus filled with symbols and scribbles, a dream manual of sorts. Historians today call these dream books, actual records, cataloging possible visions and their meanings. One discovered fragment contains matter-of-fact lines like, "If a man dreams, he drinks warm beer. Good luck is ahead." Which makes you wonder what cold beer meant. Historical evidence, sadly silent on that one. Asterisk. As you listen, your eyes grow heavy in a new way. The chamber is dimly lit, the air flavored with resin smoke, and these half-joking, half-solemn interpretations weave around you like lullabies given form. A guide leans closer and murmurs, "Dreams are important, because the gods don't waste time sending nonsense." And though you smile politely, you cannot help but smirk. If only they knew how often modern humans dream of teeth falling out, or showing up to school in pajamas. Surely even the gods enjoy a prank. Asterisk. Still, there's comfort here. Even your silliest visions would be welcomed, interpreted with gravitas, and woven into the fabric of meaning. You imagine strolling in tomorrow, announcing that you dreamt of riding a bread loaf across the Nile, and immediately being told, yes, that clearly means abundance will come. Lovely how everything here has room to become hopeful. Asterisk. The guides lean on staffs tipped with amulets. One shows you an image of the goddess Isis, protector and healer, often present in dreams. Another displays the god Thoth, the divine secretary of the universe, said to record all visions. The belief was not that you closed your eyes and collapsed into nonsense, but that you stepped into a cosmic library, where your fragments were, carefully recorded for judgment. Asterisk. Curious to lighten the mood. One younger interpreter admits she once dreamed she argued with a crocodile about taxes. The elders laugh quietly, agreeing it must have meant she feared the authorities, and possibly crocodiles. You like how even in this ancient space, laughter coils gently among seriousness, as if humans have always known that to take dreams too seriously might drive you mad. Historically, these dream guides were respected and, occasionally feared. If someone told you your dream of darkness meant literal disaster, you might spend the entire next day trembling. Others, more playful, simply rephrased even troubling visions into something optimistic. Oh no, fire in your dream. That means new beginnings, and possibly fewer mosquitoes. Historians still debate whether they truly believed all these meanings, or if dream interpretation was also part performance, a comfort offered to the anxious. Asterisk. The truth is, this practice was universal. Papyrus fragments from around 1300 BCE really do survive, describing dozens of possible dream scenarios and outcomes. They read like strange bedtime fortune cookies. Dream of gold, good omen. Dream of death, long life. Dream of crying, joy is coming. Such lists sound almost like attempts to tame the unpredictable ocean of sleep into safe night sailing routes. Asterisk. Sitting here, lulled by their voices, you glance around the semicircle and realize something. Everyone is nodding off. The guides themselves, masters of sleep interpretation, are yawning despite their passion. One drops his staff, startling himself awake. Another mumbles about fish once more, and soon the chamber is a blend of whispers and gentle snores. Asterisk. This, you decide, is your favorite irony of the evening. The so-called interpreters of dreams succumbing mid-lecture to the allure of sleep itself. Their community of analysis dissolves into a simple chorus of breathing bodies curled beneath woven mats. Perhaps the best commentary they ever offer is not in words, but in their own surrender to what they study. Asterisk. You linger a while longer. The frogs outside offer their bass notes. A lamp sputters, then steadies. The dream chamber tilts toward drowsiness like a hammock swaying slowly back and forth. All the scholarly certainty, all the symbolic weight fades until you're left only with warmth, shadows, and the tickle of possibility. What dream waits ahead for you when you close your eyes in this palace? You leave the drowsy dream guides behind, stepping softly through narrow halls until the air tells you the palace has shifted again. It cools, then thickens, and finally opens into a silent chamber with walls painted a color so dark it feels like shadow. You realize quickly, this is not a place for ordinary nights. It is a chamber of tomb furnishings, where beds and pillows have been prepared for their final, eternal use. A place where bedtime is no longer see you in the morning, but see you forever. Asterisk. It's a strange mix of eerie and oddly comforting. At first glance, the room resembles a furniture showroom, wooden frames, stacked one after another. Headrests in neat rows, each waiting to cradle someone who will never again stir awake. Yet you notice that the craftsmanship here is so lovingly done, so meticulous, that the idea of lying down for eternity suddenly seems less grim and more like a formal ceremony of getting tucked in by artisans across generations. Asterisk. The beds themselves are unlike the practical ones you saw earlier. These gleam with polished wood inlaid with ivory, or sometimes even bronze. Imagine sleeping forever on a bed decorated with golden lion claws, 4 legs, fierce enough to guard you, but elegant enough to double as style points for eternity. Some are shaped like boats because, in the Egyptian vision of existence, your journey after death was a great sail across celestial waters. Apparently, no one was going into eternity without proper nautical-themed bedroom decor, CN, and the pillows, or, rather, headrests become even more elaborate. Some are carved of alabaster, shining faintly in the flicker of lamps. Others are decorated with protective spells scratched into their surfaces. You run your fingers across one and trace out a line that might say, "Guard the sleeper, protect the head." A tender wish, really, carved into stone. After all, isn't that what every pillow in history has been asked to do? Guard us, cradle us, and ferry our half-conscious selves through the long and bewildering river of dreams. Asterisk nearby, nestled among the beds, are additional furnishings. Boxers lined with linens, jars of oils, baskets containing food. The Egyptians threw nothing halfway into eternity. If you needed it in life, you would need it beyond, and that included rest. Tomb burials reveal combs, linens, and cosmetics, all pointing to the idea that your nighttime routine never truly ends, even in the afterlife. One might almost sigh with relief. At least you don't have to face eternity inadequately moisturized. Asterisk A. Curious detail sits in the corner, a bed frame shaped like a cow. Archaeologists have often mused over these animal-shaped beds, wondering whether they were practical for the afterlife's divine sense of humor, or symbolic. Aligning the sleeper with Hathor, the motherly cow goddess of love, music, and protection. Historians still scratch their heads and debate. Were people really tucked into cow beds, or was it simply metaphor upon metaphor? The truth, frustratingly or delightfully, remains uncertain. Asterisk, remember how earlier the pharaohs seemed eager to carve how to sleep into palace walls? The echoes are here too. Instructions for the eternal bed, so to speak. Lie with your head north. Align your soul's sails with rising stars. Let the gods ferry you onward. Rest is practiced, not only nightly, but ultimately. The Egyptians were reminding themselves that death was simply the most grandiose kind of nap. Asterisk, and yet, you look closer and can't help smiling. For all the solemnity of eternal claims, there is still an undeniable humanness in these objects. The beds look just cozy enough to be practical. The headrests, though stiff, gleam as though polished by countless tired hands who hoped for comfort. Someone carved lines into the wood that, though symbolic, could almost be mistaken for the same doodling you saw earlier at Craftsman's little joke slipped into forever. Somehow, even eternity allows a wink. Asterisk, the chamber is quiet, and yet you hear faint movements outside, the shuffling of priests, the muted splash of water in purification rituals. Perhaps preparations for burial are underway elsewhere. Tonight, though, this chamber is yours, and the furniture around you becomes more than relics. They feel like a lullaby arranged for use, not just tonight, but for all the tomorrows you may never see. Sleep, in this chamber, is not fearsome. It is steady, planned, comfortable in its own strange way. Asterisk, would people resting here have felt reassured by all this furniture and ritual? Historians wonder. Did they believe the alabaster pillow really cradled their eternal dream? Or did they sometimes think, oh no, I'd rather bring my reed mat into the next world, please? The debate hangs like lamplight shadows on the wall. You tuck the question into your mind and let it drift away quietly, as the walls shimmer faintly with painted lotuses folding themselves once more for darkness. Asterisk, standing in the middle of the chamber. You feel it. A strange continuity threading itself through every room you've seen tonight. Ordinary beds, ceremonial ones, tomb furnishings, each is stitched with the same message. Whispered endlessly across centuries, that sleep, small and nightly though it is, reflects something bigger. Perhaps that is why the Pharaoh wanted bedtime instructions carved into stone, because sleep was not small at all. Asterisk, you take one more glance at the alabaster headrest, gleaming by lamplight. And this time, it doesn't look uncomfortable. Instead, it looks like an invitation. Leaving behind the alabaster pillows and eternal beds, you step through a side passage that feels unlike the grand, golden chambers. Here the palace's walls give way to something quieter, humbler, more porous mud brick lanes leading you straight into the heart of ordinary Egyptian homes. The air grows warmer again, thick with the faint smells of bread crust, straw, and smoke. This is no eternal chamber of alabaster luxury. This is the daily neighborhood where real people laid their heads after real, exhausting days. Asterisk, the first thing you notice is how small everything feels. Low ceilings, narrow rooms, clay lamps flickering weakly on shelves. Roofs are flat, made of wooden beams laid across and plastered with mud. Many families sleep, not just inside, but on the roof under stars. The cool night air preferable to the hot, crowded interior. Imagine lying there, watching Orion slowly tilt over the horizon, the frogs still audible from beyond the walls. Children roll themselves into woven mats. Dogs curl up near the door. Privacy, forget it. A family was a bundle of voices, limbs, snores, and sandals all mixed together. Asterisk, you pass one small dwelling, peeking in to find a farmer sprawled on a woven mat. Still in his linen kilt, hair flattened from sweat, with a jar of water at his side for the inevitable midnight dryness. Next door, a baker rests with flour still dusted across his skin, like a layer of moonlight that stubbornly clings, even after he's finished kneading loaves for the temple offerings. His bed is no golden lion-legged throne. It is straw, covered with a cloth that smells faintly of smoke from the communal oven. A practical bed, a real one. Asterisk, the smells of the neighborhood hang thick in the air, the garlicky temps of stew cooked earlier. The sour-sweet whiff of beer, still fermenting in clay pots. For Egyptians, beer was safer than water, served watered down in mugs throughout the day. A buzz of yeast accompanies the whole block. Tonight, it lingers warmly over those who drank perhaps one mug too many before rolling into bed. Yes, even in antiquity, some had tipsy naps. Asterisk, a funny quirk historians note. Farmers often tucked reeds or straw under their backs for cushioning, but hungry rats sometimes had other opinions about this arrangement. Imagine trying to drift off while listening to scurrying feet reclaim part of your mattress. It's no wonder protective amulets, carved figures of gods, were sprinkled even in these modest homes. Everyone wanted safety during sleep, whether from spirits or rodents. Asterisk, strangely enough, the houses are not dark. A faint glow flickers from nearly every threshold, where clay oil lamps sputter with wick fibers smoldering in animal fat. The flames are not blazing, just steady enough to give a faint orange haze, like a shooting star that refuses to go out. You feel surprised by how bright the neighborhood feels in the night. Not civilization by electricity bright, but still, everyone lived in a honeycomb of faint lamplight. Asterisk. There is warmth and intimacy here that the grandeur of alabaster beds couldn't quite offer. One family gathers even as they prepare for sleep. A grandmother tells a story. The children listening drowsily, eyes half closed, feet bruised from the day's chores. She recounts not Pharaoh's wars, but tales of animals wise enough to trick crocodiles, or gods who once appeared in dreams to farmers like themselves. Her words drift softly, competing with the croaks and buzz of the outside garden. Asterisk. And you, stranger, from the modern age, find yourself imagining sliding into one of these mats, pressed between reed walls that barely keep the insects out, listening to human murmurs fading into snores. No golden lions guard you, no alabaster pillows support your skull, and yet you feel safer here. Here, sleep doesn't need to be sacred writ. It's simply an exhausted, familiar gesture of people who have done enough hard living for one day. Asterisk, it makes you wonder, was all Egyptian sleep divided like this, the sacred and the ordinary? The pharaoh who instructed by stone versus the baker who collapsed wherever possible? Historians have tried to answer, but truthfully, much is still guesswork. Did common families care about dream interpreters' catalogs of symbols, or were they more concerned with whether the roof stayed cool at night? The questions are unresolvable, leaving you with the faint humor of imagining two completely different philosophies of bedtime happening within walking distance of each other. Asterisk. One last glimpse through another doorway, a young boy stirring on the mat, mumbling in his sleep. His mother pats his chest gently without waking him. Perhaps she whispers a prayer to Base, the household god, to chase off bad dreams. Or perhaps it is simply instinct, the tender, eternal bedtime ritual of a parent reassuring a restless child. The universal image crosses every age. No matter what grand funerary beds kings may demand, human comfort boils down to someone nearby saying softly, "You're safe. Rest now." Asterisk, the lantern light wavers. A donkey brays once in the distance, then falls silent. The whole quarter seems to sigh, as though the city itself has stretched, yawned, and pressed its head to a reed cushion. Tonight, you linger among them, small as one reed in the weaving, joining the choir of soft breaths drifting upward to meet the stars. The alleys of the neighborhood fade behind you, their oil lamps sputtering into quiet little stars of their own. You find yourself drawn back toward the margins of the palace, grounds curious, not for another golden headrest or mural of sleeping gods, but for something stranger, half-faded inscriptions. Here, tucked away in what looks like a forgotten passage, the walls murmur with fragments. You raise the torchlight imaginary. Don't worry, OSHA won't fine you for open flames in this tour, and see words carved deep but imperfect. Symbols worn almost smooth by centuries of head tilts and finger drags. They don't read cleanly like the others. Instead, they hover in that tantalizing borderland of the almost comprehensible. Some phrases clearly remind residents to calm themselves before bed. One carving depicts a lotus folded, alongside text that may well read, asterisk, so the eyes close, as petals do. Asterisk, you sigh at the poetry. Then, the next line seems to say something closer to, asterisk, don't let the neighbor's goose trouble your dreams. Asterisk, less cosmic, more practical. You grin in the torchlight. This is the delight of these passages. They flicker between grand cosmic command and what might just be palace graffiti. Scholars today scratch their heads at such inscriptions that linger like puzzle pieces. Were they earnest encouragements to align one's sleep with divine will, or the ancient Egyptian version of a joke scrawled on a bathroom wall? May sweet dreams come to you, unless your donkey snores. Imagine the centuries of Egyptology seminars, wrestling over whether that was theology or sarcasm. One quirky symbol in particular stops you, a figure of a man lying on his mat, with a bird perched directly atop his chest. The accompanying glyphs, rubbed smooth, suggest multiple translations. Was it an omen of peaceful dreams, symbolizing the soul as a bird hovering close? Or was it, as one cheeky modern theory suggests, an exaggerated doodle of what too many pigeons liked to do on rooftops at dawn? Historians still wonder if this was holy art, or a carver venting about avian neighbors. Another fading phrase warns against forgetting the dream, urging the reader to wake gently, almost ceremonially. Imagine being told by your walls each morning, don't leap out of bed, don't rush to the fields, first sit quietly, stretch, recall what messages you carried back from the night. It's oddly tender, advice any of us could use, considering how quickly modern mornings shove us face first into phone notifications. But not all the instructions are so useful. One messy scroll of symbols seems to suggest, avoid goat milk at twilight to prevent bad dreams. Was this dietary wisdom a metaphor, pure superstition, Your modern self is tempted to imagine goats lobbying for unjust nighttime slander. Picture one very angry goat in antiquity, braying, "Excuse me, I had nothing to do with your nightmares." What you love about these fragments is precisely their ambiguity. Each phrase throws a question back at you. Were Egyptian sleep instructions largely thoughtful health advice, like breathe deeply? Or were they attempts to regulate households with more authority than truly needed? Was it benevolence or bureaucracy? You hold the question in your hand like a pebble, not heavy, not sharp, but worth turning over a few times as you walk. And there's something endearingly human about the fact that even grand empires leave us with half-faded reminders. Imagine, thousands of years into the future, fragments of our own bedtime wisdom surviving as archaeological riddles. A faded sign reading asterisk "Don't eat heavy after 8 p.m." Asterisk might be argued over like sacred text. Future scholars could claim it was cosmological advice, when in fact it was just diet trends. The air here is cooler, the stone walls damp and cracked, inviting the night to press inside. You run your fingers along the grooves, faded, fractured, yet persistent. Everything about the palace is designed to last forever, but forever wears thin at the edges. Still, enough lines survive to whisper across time. Rest well, dream true, watch out for geese. The important things, clearly, somewhere beyond the walls. You catch again the chorus of frogs, the distant hush of the Nile flowing. These sounds stitch into the broken lines before you, as if both script and nature are saying the same thing. We have always tried to turn sleep into poetry, even when half the verse rubs away. And so you stand in the shadowy corridor, a smile tugging at your lips, amused that one pharaoh's attempt to control dreams has left us instead with jokes, questions, puzzles, and half-sense poetry. The stone hasn't answered anything clearly, and yet, isn't that exactly what dreams do? Have phrases, fragments, partly true and partly nonsense. The Egyptians may have left us less of a manual and more of a dream itself on stone. You step gently out of the corridor of faded inscriptions and follow the drift of air that pulls you toward the riverside. The world opens suddenly, like an exhale, and there it is, the Nile, under moonlight, dark and liquid silver, flowing with the patience of ages. No carvings here, no painted ceilings, no stiff alabaster headrests, only water, rushing and murmuring as though the river itself is practicing the art of bedtime storytelling. Asterisk. The banks are soft beneath your sandals, cool now with dew. Reeds stretch like tidy vertical brushstrokes against the sky, and in them, insects sing their persistent hymn. Each note overlaps with the next, until the whole night becomes a flowing, endless hum. You settle down near the edge, wrapping imaginary arms around your knees, and close your eyes for a moment, simply to listen. The Nile, in its immense length, is not a quick river. It doesn't dash or rush like mountain streams. Instead, it slides onward with a rhythm deliberate enough that you almost find your own breathing adjusting to match it. Inhale like the water rises, exhale like it passes along. If rivers can lull to sleep, then this one is the undefeated champion. Asterisk nearby. Someone in a small skiff pushes through the water with a single oar. You hear the creak, then the soft splash, like heartbeat echoes against the wide silence. Maybe he is heading home after late fishing, or maybe he simply wanted to drift under the stars a while longer. His lantern swings from the boat's edge, briefly mirrored in the water as a second moon, only to shiver apart with every ripple. A boat, a lantern, and the river itself, ingredients enough for an ancient lullaby. Asterisk. The Egyptians revered this river enough that they shaped their entire calendar around it. Night by the Nile wasn't just scenery, it was a lifeline. Sirius, that star you saw earlier, aligned with its floods. Its yearly swelling brought silt for crops, food for markets, life for entire villages, hanging along the banks. But here, in the quiet night, The floodwaters are not calendars or mathematics. They are a liquid comfort, stretching infinite, humming eternal. Asterisk, you lean back against a stone embankment. The nightly air, scented faintly by river mud and fresh growth, cools your face. In the distance, a chorus of frogs resumes its concert, punctuated by a single cow lowing. The effect is less threatening, more like a rustic lullaby from the chorus of Egyptian farm life. It's as though humans didn't invent bedtime background noises. They simply borrowed what nature has always whispered. Asterisk. Everywhere, faint signs of human life. The riverside, the glow of oil lamps drifting in fishermen's huts, a donkey shifting his weight nearby, his rope creaking, a pair of young children clambering up a slope before curling into one another, mumbling before sleep. This riverside is not a museum. Dioramid is a breathing community, threaded together by water and rhythm. Asterisk, and yet, what you keep noticing most is the sound. The flowing Nile doesn't roar, it whispers. Its voice is deep and smooth, lapping faintly at stones, carrying a refrain that says, keep moving, keep resting, keep moving, keep resting. You tilt your head, half amused. Yes, the Nile itself is essentially humming the world's oldest white noise machine. Many of us flick on box fans or rainfall apps at night. Egyptians simply had the advantage of an entire river flowing next to their windows. Asterisk. One quirky tradition. Certain rituals encouraged sleeping outdoors by the river for special nights, believing that prophecies and dreams came more clearly to those resting under stars, where divine breezes swept in unfettered. Imagine the Pharaoh scolding his scribes for not lying down by the Nile often enough. How shall we receive true messages if your ears are stuffed with that palace silence? To which the scribes must have thought, also mosquitoes, your majesty? Asterisk. Historians wonder whether ordinary Egyptians felt more secure by the Nile at night, or more vulnerable. The same river that was lifeblood was also unpredictable. Hippos, crocodiles, even a sudden rise in water could turn tranquility into chaos. Yet here, tonight in your wandering, no danger lurks at all. Just the endless hymn of water reminding you that not every force of nature has to be feared. Some, in fact, are perfect companions for sleep. Asterisk. You press your palm to the damp soil, feeling the patience that lies under it. Cool, nurturing, promising crops and mornings to come. The distant rush blends perfectly with the warmth you still carry from palace corridors. Gardens, perfumes, frogs, scribes, dream guides, they all converge now in this river chorus. It's almost too perfect, how the Nile seems to tie everything together, like a final lullaby playing after many verses of smaller songs. Asterisk. And lying there, you imagine yourself drifting in a reed boat, weightless, rockless, carried wherever the slow current will take you. No danger, no control, and no need for either. Just the knowing that movement flows soft as breath, as steady as eyelids closing, night after night. Asterisk. The riverside fades into a softer path, and soon, the world feels a touch more mythic again. You follow flickering lamplight back into the palace, toward a chamber painted with colors brighter than any moon. Here the walls don't tell of headrests or reed mats, but of gods themselves, guardians of all who dared to close their eyes. Asterisk. Overhead, stretching wide and impossible, you see Nut, the sky goddess, painted across the ceiling. Her long body arches protectively across the chamber, her fingertips brushing one horizon while her toes reach the other. Stars scatter across her skin, like freckles gifted by the cosmos. She is not frightening. Here she is, maternal, vast and calm, her long body serving as a cosmic blanket under which the entire world curls. You tilt your head back, and for a fleeting moment, you could almost believe you were sleeping under her steady arc, guarded by the very roof of heaven itself. Asterisk. At the edge of the chamber crouches Base again, that goblinish tongue-sticking household protector you glimpsed earlier, here, in the temple-like chamber. He's even more exuberant, his big round eyes bugging with playful ferocity, his drum poised in hand to scare away bad dreams. You can't help but chuckle. If nut represents your coverlet, bass is certainly your no-nonsense nightlight. Imagine every creak on the roof, every bump in the dark, faced down with his squat little silhouette. A cozy thought, if not exactly majestic, asterisk all around. Smaller gods appear in murals. Isis, kneeling and spreading her wings like linen sheets, hovers near what looks like a sleeping figure on a bed. Thoth, the divine scribe, sits poised as though recording every dream in a ledger, neat as bureaucracy always insists. You pause a moment to feel amused again what comfort there must be, knowing even nightmares would be catalogued by cosmic accountants. No dream slips unnoticed when gods with pens stand watch. Asterisk the air in the chamber is warm, laced with faint resin smoke and something more indefinable. Reverence so strong it feels tangible, as though worship has settled in the plaster over centuries. Everyone who entered this space whispered here, walked softly here, with the belief that the gods didn't just occasionally swing by during dreams, they lived here, slumbering alongside you, woven into your bed, humming in your lamp flames. Asterisk you sink onto a woven mat against the wall, gazing at Nut's vast arch one more time. It's remarkable, the Egyptians didn't treat sleep as empty. They treated it as full as an occupied state, a place the gods entered to speak, to guide, to protect. In that sense, there was no such thing as being alone in bed. However solitary your mat, or stiff your headrest, you shared it with invisible companions, watching from shadows and stars. It makes you think of your own nightly routines, perhaps glancing around a quiet bedroom, as though to double-check you are indeed the only one there. But in this painted chamber, such solitude did not exist. Sleep was community, woven with gods. Asterisk. And of course, there is that human undercurrent of humor you can't resist. You imagine someone praying earnestly to Nut for protection while best hung out. Eyes wide is scaring the wits out of the children, even if his intentions are good. Or perhaps a worshipper begging Thoth for a positive dream while muttering under their breath. Also, maybe don't record the embarrassing details, please. The gods might have been sacred, but in the intimacy of bedtime, they rose to humanity's level. Sacred or not, they were part of the very human need to feel safe under blankets. Asterisk. Historians still puzzle over how literally these nightly deities were embraced. Were Nut's stars seen as theological symbol or real presence for every sleeper? Did everyone honestly believe Base stood at the door with a tiny invisible spear? Or was he more like a comforting mascot? There's no straight answer, and maybe that's what makes the imagery work. Sleep lives best in ambiguity, the halfway world. Gods and dreams didn't need clarity. They thrived in the unexplainable. Asterisk torches sputter softly, casting their glow back up onto painted ceilings, making Nut's starry silhouette seem to shimmer as though she herself sighs. The chamber grows quieter, the croaks of the frogs outside muffled, the shuffle of servants absorbed into hush. All that remains is the sense of presence, the gods stitched into air. Asterisk here. Everything reminds you that no matter how alone you may feel in ordinary nights, humanity has always conjured companions. Night after night, Egyptians nestled beneath invisible guardian sky mothers, squat guardians, quiet scribes, and trusted that when their eyes closed, the universe itself stayed with them. And in that trust was comfort deeper than alabaster pillows or carved headrests ever could provide. The lamplit chamber of guardians recedes into darkness as you tread once more toward the edge of night. The air cools again, carrying you gently back toward the open sky. You step out beneath the stars, and the desert seems transformed. Not harsh or endless, just soft, curved, and endless in a way that doesn't frighten but comforts. The silhouettes of distant dunes look like the folds of some enormous blanket across the land. Asterisk above you. The Milky Way slashes across the heavens, far brighter than the diluted speckles modern skies would allow. Ancient Egyptians saw these stars as a celestial river, mirroring their own Nile, glimmering in sync with the waters you just left. Tonight, both stretch wide before you, a silver ribbon overhead, a silver shadow below. You feel caught blissfully between them, suspended in a weaving too vast to ever unravel. Asterisk, the palace fades behind, its oils and frogs, its painted ceilings and headrests, turning into the kind of half-memories one keeps upon awakening from a vivid dream. Out here, under the stillness, sound carries differently lower, softer. The little gossip of reeds, the occasional faint plash of unseen fish, and the heavy hush of a universe urging you to let go. Asterisk, you find a space of cool sand and lower yourself carefully down. The grains shift, squeak under your weight, then mold to your form, as though they've been keeping your place. Lying there, you gaze at the fading stars, each one pulsing with a strange familiarity, as though they are blinking in time with your breath. For a moment you let your chest rise and fall, in rhythm. Inhale, stars expand. Exhale, stars relax. Sleep is not something you force. The stars insist. It is something you slip into, as naturally as the Nile slides past its banks. Asterisk, in the far distance, the faintest horizon glow hints at dawn creeping somewhere unseen beyond the bends of the earth. You realize that soon. The spell of night will dissolve, and the palace will wake again. Scribes rubbing ink from their eyes, carvers cracking stiff joints, bakers smudged with flour. But for now, in this space between star and dawn, the world is still yours. Asterisk, what stays with you most is the peculiar gentleness of all you've witnessed. Of Pharaoh's eccentric bedtime rules, carved into walls, not with harshness, but with hope. Artisans chiseling lullabies while yawning at their own exhaustion. Oils and herbs prepared lovingly for drowsy peace. Ordinary families tangled onto their mats, the donkey braying in the background but no less at rest. Frogs, stars, dream guides. Gods all offered their voices to the same song. Sleep matters. Asterisk, so you sink deeper. Sand cool against your back, air damp with the Nile's breathing. You surrender entirely, no longer observing, no longer wondering which detail is symbolic or literal. Everything has collapsed into one, a single, drowsy hymn that hums through stone and air alike. Your lids lower. The night wraps you finally as though Nut herself has bent down to tuck you gently beneath her cosmic arms. Asterisk, and you out here, centuries away from your own bed, relax, so completely that the sands of Egypt might as well be linen. You're part of the sleepers now, drifting toward that gentle moment when stars blur into dreams. Soon the horizon will reclaim them, but that is no concern of yours. You are already elsewhere, adrift with the multitude of ancient dreamers resting alongside you. Asterisk, the Pharaoh's bedtime laws, it turns out, worked after all. Asterisk, and now, as your journey along the Nile fades into the hush of night, there is nothing more to witness, nothing more to do. All that remains is the sound of your own breathing, steady and calm, like the river you sat beside. Inhale slowly. Let your chest rise like the curve of sand beneath the stars. Exhale gently. Let your body soften, as though the dunes themselves were cradling you. Asterisk, picture Nut, the sky goddess, still stretched long above you, her star-freckled body arched as a great protective canopy. See how she leans just slightly closer, covering you like the softest blanket stitched in eternity. Beneath her best, the squat guardian plants himself cheerfully at the corner of your bed, chasing away every worry with his absurd grin. And around you, the river hums on, a lullaby older than nations, older than names. Asterisk, the air grows slower, as if even the walls of your room have joined the rhythm. Your shoulders settle, sinking back. Your breath drifts into that longer shape of deep sleep, where each exhale hangs lazily, like a sail catching still water. Time itself feels rounded at the corners, blurred and softened. Asterisk, imagine your dreams arriving now as light steps along the sand, no hurry. No disruption, quiet messengers crossing the threshold. They bring you only calm tonight, only stillness, and perhaps a touch of humor from ancient walls where someone carved a bedtime reminder. They gather near, surround you, and then fold you within them. Asterisk, so rest now. You are held, guarded, soothed. The stars above you will wait. The rivers will flow without you. The frogs will continue their secret chorus. None of them requires your attention. Only sleep does, and it has already opened its arms.